Hello everyone, I am Chava Peribán. I am here today with
Marcela Sandoval.
Marcela Sandoval. This is Heritage Mezcal, I forgot to say that. And could you introduce yourself? Because you have such a complex profile in my mind that if I try to tell people what do you do for a living, I'm sure I'm going to mess it up. So could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Chava. So as I said, my name is Marcela Sandoval Velasco. I'm, originally from Morelia, Michoacán, born and raised there.
Michoacán. Thank you, God, for making such a beautiful place.
Exactly. But yeah, what I do or how I would define myself is I'm a paleogenomicist. So I'm a scientist that devotes her scientific career to study genomes from the past.
Genomes from the past. And this is on planet Earth. You do not try to find like aliens or anything like that, right?
This is all on our beautiful planet Earth. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you do that, but it's not about dinosaurs. You are working specially or specifically on agave lately, if I may understand that correctly.
Exactly. So for the last couple of years, I've been studying agaves and most importantly, the history of the relationship between humans and agaves for the last 10,000 years.
10,000 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and again, like I think sometimes people in the agave world, we're very prompt to exaggerating things just because we love it too much. But so it's not a guess, it's documented, or there's enough information for us to know that people have had a relationship, a tangible relationship with agave for 10,000 years.
Yeah, pretty much very tangible, very, very well recorded in the archaeological record. Not only, historically, we have all of these more recent, we could say, sources of historical documents like the Mesoamerican codices that denote and picture this relationship between humans and agaves. But if we go even further back in time, the archaeological record has proven to show us that humans had a relationship, had been using, consuming for different things, agaves for the longest time since hunter-gatherers arrived into our precious now Mexico. Yeah.
Or well, like continent or Mexico.
Yeah.
But I think like I read in some notes that you sent me that you're specializing specifically in Mesoamerica.
Yeah.
And I think that is important to comment because agave is very widespread. Like it's, you can find it all, I don't know if in Canada, but I'm sure like in a bunch of areas in the US and I've seen agaves in Peru. So it's like, throughout the American continent.
Yeah, totally. So it's super interesting because agave naturally distributes from the American Southwest, and the northern point where it's been found is Utah, and there's an agave utahensis that exists over there, and one of the few.
Wait. There's an agave utahensis.
Yeah. That, as I say, is one of the ones that
is it Mormon? Does it resist
I don't
to
know
be
much
distilled?
about it personally, but no,
that was a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. And one of the few that can take all of these freezing temperatures, because agaves not necessarily like these freezing temperatures, as resilient as they are. They, like their weathers, but utahensis over there can survive and thrive in freezing temperatures. Yeah, and then, as I said, naturally distributes through all that part of the U.S., all Mexico, some parts of Florida, the Caribbean, Central America, all the way Colombia and Peru, some of them.
And just to be extremely clear about this is not a new thing. This is not like people brought an agave to Utah in the last 5 decades. This is something that is a product of centuries, if not millennia, of distribution of this plant, right?
Definitely not 5 decades. Yeah, but it could be that some of these species this is something that we don't know, right? And part of my research wants to also dive into this type of questions, how much the distribution that we see today in agave as a genus, as a group of species, actually has been driven by human movement.
Which I think that leads to my next question. And I think that sometimes when people that work in the biology context, they don't quite like humans that much. Yeah, like they're very obsessed about their plants, they're very obsessed about their animals, but then they don't necessarily study the relationship between humans and their plants or these animals. For me, it's very clear that you love both sides of this coin, right?
Yeah.
Or at least I get that impression.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for so many, not only agaves, but for so many other plants, they don't go separate. If you think about corn doesn't exist without humans. If you think about, tomato, beans, squash, think about any of the plants that we consume today. They all have been mostly, unless they are like quelites, like wild plants that we consume that they just like are around and we just harvest them. There's a lot of plants that we use for that, or on that side of the spectrum today. But most of the plants that we consume, and animals as well, they've been through this process of relationship with humans and what we call the process of domestication that now has brought them to be what they are and are somehow dependent on humans.
And I think like the obliged question here, because, when we use the word domestication, that can mean so many different things in so many different contexts, right? And I think the most present image of anybody that talks about domestication are dogs and cats, right? Like domestic animals. But then I am sure there's various degrees or various levels of domestication and in which these relationships have worked. Do you have a way of defining domestication? Or, am I stepping like...
We can dare to define it. It is definitely one of the most complex evolutionary processes to define because they are so many shades and so many degrees of domestication, and because it is a continuum. So it is as an evolutionary process, it's something that, just keeps evolving, keeps changing, and keeps just being.
Okay,
But if we were to define it somehow, and it depends on many things, but we could define it as an evolutionary process that results in changes, both genetic, morphological changes on the domesticated species, and went through some time. And at the end, the domesticated product, one of the more accepted definitions, is that it cannot survive without its domesticate.
Okay, so I think this is a great lead into trying the first period we're going to try, because what you just said, I think, is so critical, I think, for today's agave context. And you have the bottles by you, so you're going to be the one in charge of pouring Cascawin.
Super, yeah.
Because, this is fascinating what you said. So without the relationship, a lot of these plants, animals, whatevers, won't be able to survive. And one of the biggest problems right now in the tequila context, which is what we're going to be trying right now, is that a lot of these agaves are not flowering anymore. So they need of humans in order to go plant the pops in order to continue to exist.
Exactly.
So absent humans, maybe we want to have this beautiful thing.
Yeah, so that's
so
exactly...
pretty. Yeah, right?
So this part of the domesticated species can no longer survive without its domesticator. I think that, in some cases totally applies, as you just said it, for agave and for tequilana, but in some others, it's not that clear, right?
Okay, so, and again, this is becoming such a difficult conversation, but I think I'm going to try to make sense of it.
It's how complex it is, the process, and studying agaves in this sense.
So I'm going to try to do even a bigger provocation out of this, because we're already in this, whatevers. So I think that, and I'm sure this is quite a controversial thing, who is a domesticator and who is the one being domesticated? So
Such philosophical question.
Well, yes, of course. Of course.
Because there is I love this branch of philosophy that also, explores how much are humans being domesticated by its environment.
That is exactly...
which I don't know anything about. But, generally in this context of the studies about specifically plants or crops or the species that we relate to, we studied it because we think that we are, humans, but I think clever ones.
we are the masters.
Mostly, wrong on that, but generally you study it based on humans being the domesticator.
So I think I can actually rephrase this question in a more legible, easier way to approach this. 10,000 years of relations between humans and agaves, and in a nutshell, which would you say that have been the consequences for both sides? like why did humans why did they choose agave to create such a strong bond? Why not another another resilient crop? There's many resilient crops.
Yeah.
There's many other things that they could have chosen, but they decided to create this very strong link with agave. And this link both changed agave and it changed what we drink, like what we're drinking right now. Maybe it didn't change us, like genetically, but it changed a lot of our cultures.
Totally.
So I guess my question will be do you use how do you track that? How do you track these changes both in agave and in the cultures that were profiting out of this agave? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's very, great question, very deep, and I want to say so many things. But yeah, so why did humans choose agave is something that we probably won't never know. Why did it happen? There are so many legends surrounding why is agave important, right? And in most, as I said, mostly in recent recorded history, we can see, the myth of Mayahuel and the arousal of how agaves came to exist on Earth, based on this myth. But yeah, as I said, why exactly, we will never know. But what we know and what's recorded in the archaeological record, as I said, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth on this because I think it's just so fascinating.
Please,
so I'm going to dare to say that every archaeological site in Mexico, and there's thousands of them, have what we call archaeobotanical remains attached to them. So archaeobotanical remains are archaeological remains of plants. So botanical plants, archaeology.
And I think that's not super easy for people to imagine because you think of as this organic material to evaporate, to rot and not to leave traces.
And it does. In so many of these sites, it does. So when archaeologists dig up on these sites, you see some traces, right? So what archaeologists do is they find the site and then you go deep into the earth, and you're going as you're going deep into the earth, you're going back in time. Why? Because Earth accumulates, seasons happen, whatever.
Just like my house, when I'm not there for 3 weeks, there's many layers of dust, and I can know what happened 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
But these are what archaeologists call, there are open-air sites, like Teotihuacan and all of these, more, open air, as the term implies, But there's also all of these archaeological sites that are attached to caves and rock shelters, where this material preserves way better, almost outstandingly and in perfect conditions through time, because they act as shelters, allowing for a controlled temperature and kind of protecting them from all of these climatic events that would otherwise lead to all of this organic material to, as you say, rot and disappear and decay through time, right? So attached to all of these, or next to all of these open-air sites that we know and love and experience and love visiting throughout Mexico, there are all of these caves and rock shelters.
Now you're making me want to go into a tour of just of caves around Mexico. I'm not going to care about pyramids anymore.
Yeah, right? I mean, when you see them, they might not look that interesting, but they are fascinating because they specifically hold the history of humans in these super old times, way before there were these civilizations established.
Absolutely, and I guess that just in the history of humans, you first had these kind of refuges that were more simple. You were taking advantage of nature as it existed instead of building these cathedrals of stone, right?
Exactly. So for thousands of years, people survived and made their homes out of these natural shelters.
Yeah,
and they were their homes and they were also their dumpsters. So they occupy them. Generally is described as seasonally because they were hunter-gatherers going here and there and then taking shelter from the environment and different seasons in these places, right? So they have been super important for the study of domestication in general of plants. Mostly people have looked for them for the last 100 years trying to understand the history of domestication of corn. Because corn is one of the most important staple crops.
Well, that's what makes us Mexican. Absent corn, I think we'll have a huge identity crisis.
I would say agave makes us Mexican.
I love this. I'm going to fundamentally agree with you, but I need you to support that argument.
But and why I'm going to say this, and why I ended up studying and making my line of research this one, was because I started reading about this, and attached to all of these rock shelters and caves where people were looking for corn, going deep in time into the strata where you dig and you can date that, and it gives you like an actual chronological date of like, okay, this layer corresponds to 5,000 years ago, and the layer below it is like 7,000 years ago, and the layer below it is 10,000 years ago. So they were, of course, finding corn, and that's what archaeologists, 100 years ago literally cared about, or still care about, but like they were digging these places for that. But they were also finding all of these other things. And one of the most important or like abundant that they were finding were remains of agave. Very, very deep in time.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm sure you're going to answer this, but was it cooked agave? Was it leaves? Was it the quiote? I'm sure you're going to get to that, but I'm sorry. I'm burning with curiosity.
It was all of it. So all of it, and not only just botanical remains, as we would call just these like different parts of the plant remains, but also kind of processed or worked remains. So necklaces and jewelry, or like basketry, sandals, textiles.
Oh, Lord.
All of these things, and in different, as I said, in different chronological order.
So it persisted. It was a crop that was, that was able, and you're talking about millennia in the middle of the strata.
Yeah.
So it stayed there.
Yeah, it stays there, and the caves protect them, and then you dig them out and you bring out, obviously not a perfect textile, like a very, patches and pieces, but you can see it. And sometimes they're dyed.
They're dyed.
Yeah.
So they were dyed.
Yeah. Isn't it like amazing? We should, one day maybe we should do a podcast or an episode inside the collection.
Oh, please. Inside the cave, I thought you were going to say.
Well,
the dumpster.
Harder to reach, but
I think Roy would love those sounds. I think Roy will really enjoy the sound quality inside the cave. It's so funny. Like, you are making my brain go to all different set of things. Just dumps. Like, I just will have never thought. It's obvious that dumpsters are a really precise way of getting to know a civilization. It's just like something you don't quite talk a lot about.
Yeah, you don't really think about it, and you don't really think about all of these remains to actually be telling us or have the potential to tell us the story of humans thousands of years ago, of humans in where we live today, right?
Christ. Okay, so you were starting to see that corn was this narrative that probably had more prestige in academia. It was the one that was getting the funding, or I don't know what. And then you're like, okay, there's that weirdo there that they're finding.
No, I was, for, a long time being attached to agave for the same reason that brought us here, Mezcal.
Yes.
But I didn't know, 10 years ago, I didn't know that this existed and that there was an actual record, tangible record, as we were saying, of this relationship and these uses of humans and agave, and, geographically wide as well. I'm not talking about one cave. I'm talking about several caves all around Mexico, all around the US and Central America, where the same thing is found, right? So, and let me go a little bit deep into like your previous question, like not we, because I didn't excavate any of this. That's
then I don't want to talk with you anymore. No, I just want to talk to the people that are excavating.
Well, some of them have died, but
oh shit. Okay, then never mind. But
no. This is like, these excavations happen like. I'm right now studying some group of caves in Tamaulipas, and they were excavated in the 40s. And then a cave in the Tehuacan Valley, and these were excavated in the 60s, and then a cave in Oaxaca, and this was excavated in the 80s.
Okay, so you're covering, a bunch of the Mexican territory.
Yeah,
That's lovely.
I'm also studying a cave in Honduras.
Oh, wow.
And trying to study some places also in the Southwest.
Like, it's just so crazy to me how the more we get to know about spirits, about agave, it's always confirming that it was a very widespread phenomena.
Yeah.
That it belonged to many different cultures, to many different mindsets. I think it's a lovely thing.
Yeah, and the importance of it, right? It's not for nothing that this is the only plant next to corn that has a deity, right?
Oh, it's fascinating.
Like, we know about Mayahuel, but we never think that, why agave has a deity, like a pre-Hispanic deity. And corn has a deity, which name I don't remember because I don't study corn. But like, they are the only two that have a deity. It was so important that it had a goddess.
Goddess dedicated to that crop.
Exactly. Isn't that, it blows your mind when you think about it.
Yeah. I just had never, obviously rain, obviously water, obviously war, the sun.
But plants, beans could have a deity, squashes, the milpa, the triad of the milpa, super important. Chilies, so important.
And they never got into the mythological pantheon.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So anyway, you're studying these caves, and what you're finding textiles, you're finding food, you're finding jewelry. And are you getting any conclusions out of these? Like what it's
Well, it's a very much ongoing study. It's the type of work that we do involves a lot of very hard experimental work. So what we're trying to do is take and recover the DNA and hence the genome of agaves from these archaeological remains, to try to and compare it to modern day plants.
Oh Lord.
So we also, I'll talk a little bit more about that, to try to understand how has it changed through time. First of all, we don't know. What we know from these archaeological sites is like, there's all of these remains of agaves. That's it. But agave is,
but you don't know which agave is
300 plus things. Exactly. So we don't know which agaves, in which places, in which times.
Yeah, and what you sent me is 2,500 agave species.
No.
That are documented,
No, I think you misunderstood me. No, what is today, there are around 2,500 plant species that we use in Mexico for different things.
Okay.
Agave species, people kind of like
dance
fight
around
about
that number,
this, but it's between like 250 to 310.
That's a good diversity. Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's not. Plants are crazy. And
I'm gonna quote you on that. Plants are crazy. Love it.
But yeah, an agave is not the genus. So a genus is a group of species that are very well related, but it's not the most diverse or big genuses of plants. They're like orchids. There's thousands of species of orchids.
But it's still crazy.
But 300 species is a lot.
Yes.
Humans, we're one species.
Yeah. Basically, yes. So you're finding these, but there's a lot of questions that you have about which agave is this.
Exactly. So the first thing I have to do is like figure out, okay, this botanical remain, and in the archaeological remains, as I say, we find all of these
applications
or like products of human
interaction with agave.
But also like spines and like different tools. We find like, you have eaten agave, cooked agave?
Happily so.
Yeah, and so you chew it and you extract the juices and you extract whatever, and then you spit it.
I've even
you swallow it.
I have. I don't recommend it to anybody. Don't sue us. But yeah, no, it's not a pleasant thing to get just straight cellulose into your body.
You're supposed to spit it.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's very fibrous. So what we find is a lot of these spits. It's like agave chewing gum. That's been preserved thousands of years, right? So, and that's kind of like very, very vastly found all around, which means that people were surviving and eating a lot of agave. And this is also something that's been very well documented based on this archaeological record, that before we had, or humans had, any of the crops they made a sustenance from, they were surviving mostly from agave. and nopal and other like wild
This is the
stuff.
first time I've ever heard such a theory.
It's real. It's not a theory.
Well, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Well, it's the first,
I wish it was a theory. I think it was pretty well.
it is the
and I
first
didn't
time.
prove it. People like, decades ago.
But it's crazy. Like, I've never heard of this, that a significant part of the diet of Mexicans was based on these things that were not farmed crops, because they were not farming them in the way that we understand farming these days, or were they farming them?
Like what we think, and archaeologists and ethnobotanists and historians have suggested, and that's what I'm trying to prove with these new molecular methods, is that, that first people were harvesting just agave, wild, surviving out of like whatever they could find around them. But then at some point, they started cultivating it. And you also see this in the archaeological records in some sites. You also start seeing like what suggests to be like cultivation grounds attached to remains
to
of
the
agave.
cities, to the
Exactly.
Well,
And very, thousands of years ago.
I mean, that is so fascinating, because I think in a lot of the lore of agave spirits, people are always saying, like, back in the day when all of the agave was wild. And what you're telling us is like, no.
Maybe not all of the agave has always been wild. So, but we don't know. That's the thing, right? Like that's what I'm trying to use these methods to try to understand, like, because cultivation and domestication leaves marks, scars in the genome that when you compare it to the wild counterpart, you can see that it has changed, that it has adapted somehow. Like you said, the ability to produce seed or not. That is a scar that comes with cultivation. There's so many clear examples in crops that have been studied for decades, right? Corn again. Or wheat, right? Domesticated wheat has lost the ability to shed its seed. So it just cannot spread naturally anymore. And that, you see it in the genome, like it just lost this gene.
That is the darkest thing I've ever heard when talking about agriculture. They have a scarred genome.
I don't think in a dark way. It's a beautiful thing. Domestication is such a beautiful
from
process.
now on, when I talk about tequila, I'm just going to say, this is the scarred genome.
It sounds dark, but Mark. Just call it Mark. But yeah, no.
I love it. I'm still gonna use this.
But yeah. So and you can actually see this. You can actually see this in the genomes. So that's what I'm trying to find.
So okay, I think we should start maybe wrapping this up, because I think the other, as domestication has many interpretations. Cultivation also has many shapes and forms. It's not always that you have to have a very clean up field and then you have to go to it.
No, not at all. Management has so many different
shapes and forms.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that is also one of the most exciting things about your research.
Yeah. And most exciting and most complex, right? You're trying to fit into explaining something that it's so fluid, right? That doesn't necessarily have an answer. So that's why it's pretty much ongoing. But yeah.
And this is a question that I wanted to not do, but whatever, we're over here. And sometimes I don't necessarily want to get on the moral grounds or ethical grounds of stuff, but I think a lot, and just because we're in this context of agave spirits, a lot of people, I think, will share the idea that a more wild agave, or an agave that has less relationship, or less of a strong relationship with humans, it's a better agave for the environment. There's almost like this notion that if it's something like intense agriculture, or if that relationship is too close, that almost automatically that means that it's going to be hurting the environment around it.
Yeah.
I don't think that should be the case. And so, I guess I'm saying this just to think, do you think in some of the research you're doing, maybe we can get sort inspiration of how these people were managing these crops in a way that was nourishing the nature around it instead of destroying it?
I mean, I hope so. I don't think, I'm not that much going into the depth of how they were managing it, but if they were managing it and how
consequences.
Exactly. In today's how does it compare to what we see today in the agave species that, we harvest, that are in the botanical gardens, that are used for the different things. But yeah, I think it's an underestimation that like humans, that at the moment that they set a feet on Earth, they start managing their environment and modifying the landscape. And we tend to think that they didn't.
Yeah, we're not pure. We always have a dumpster.
But definitely that there were and there are practices that are, better than others, right? I agree with you that going back to that, it's a positive thing, but it's not what my research touches.
Cool. And I mean, you've been doing this for a while now. And do you have any idea is this like a life project? It sounds like a life project.
It is. I envision it like being like 5 to 10 years, and I'm on like year 3. So.
Good Lord. And then, I mean, I guess this another crazy thing about agave.
Yeah, scientific progress sometimes takes longer than you expect, but
Takes longer than the agave life cycle.
Yeah.
Lord. Okay, well, Marcela, it's been nothing but a pleasure. It's honestly, I would love to stay here and talk with you for hours and hours. But I think Roy and our memories in the cameras would not agree with such an approach. Thank you very much.
It's been great. Thank you.
Señorita, saludcita. Madre Santa. Está cabrón.
Next time I'll bring some.
This was Heritage Mezcal, the incredibly eclectic podcast that likes to delve into the depths of the country we call Mexico. I am Chava Peribán, your host, and I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. All the sounds, all the music, and now all the videos living in YouTube are made by Roy Sierra. Tómese el mezcalito con gusto y medida y nos miramos al rato.